Okay, what are we doing today? Today we're going to talk about some tips for running a tunnel ram on the street. So let me talk about what I'm going to talk about. And I'm going to talk about what worked for me, what I actually did. So I'm not going to be giving you any anecdotal stuff about what my buddy's brother in high school did to his Nova. You know, none of this, shit your grandpa did. Like, I'm going to tell you what I actually did and what worked for me. I'm not going to tell you regurgitate stuff I read on the internet or what I think worked. And if it is something that's an opinion of mine, I'll flat out tell you, this is what I think. Whether I'm right or wrong, that's up to you. So what I'm going to start with, and this is for, if you're an expert in this field, like I'm not a carburetor guy, admittedly. I am a mechanic, but the bulk of my education is post 1996, or what they call OBD2. So I'm a fuel injection guy, like, by nature, because that's what I was taught. But over the years, I've gotten into this older stuff, and it's fun to learn about, but I don't claim to be an expert. If I give you some information that you think is wrong or that you want to debate, by all means, leave it in the comments. I'm cool with debating and discussing things, and you learn by being wrong sometimes. If something needs to be corrected, let's hear about it. I'm all open for discussion. So with that, the first thing I want to talk about, and this is designed for somebody who maybe you're already running a single 4-barrel and you want to switch to a tunnel ram. You like the way it looks. You hear that they can make more power. The first thing that I would tell you is, if you don't already have one, get yourself a wideband O2 sensor. Now, if you're an expert at reading spark plugs and you're a good tuner, then for one thing, you probably don't need this video. And two, by all means, do that. If you're comfortable reading plugs, hey, use that. I'm not, so I use a wideband. I mean, preferably you would want a wideband for each bank. I only have one. It gives me a good enough idea of what's going on to tune and make adjustments of which direction that I need to go. Two, you have to be honest with yourself about your engine and the direction that you want to go with it. My engine is not a stock engine, so everything that I did to this engine, every choice that I made, is of course going to be different for you and your engine. Now, if you've got a bone stock, 350 with stock heads and cam, you got to ask yourself, is a tunnel ram really what you want to do? Because it's likely not going to help you. A tunnel ram is for an engine that's a little higher performance. It works better. Like anything that if you're gonna add a bigger cam, if you're gonna add bigger carburetors, the more performance that your engine is gonna put out, the better it's gonna run when you add modifications to it. If you're putting big carburetors or a big cam or an intake that flows way too much on a stock engine, it's likely gonna hurt you more than it helps you. It's like a guy going into the gym and picking way too much weight for where he's at. It's not gonna help him. It's gonna hurt him. So with that being said, if you want to do it, make sure that the tunnel ram that you're choosing, because that's gonna matter, and your engine are somewhat capable of handling what you're trying to do. This is what they call a street tunnel ram. It's got smaller runners. It's designed for a street application. It's not an all-out drag race, huge runners, super high RPM, all the time type of intake. Be practical about your engine, about what you want it to do, and whether a tunnel ram is going to work for you or not. If you have a bone stock engine, I would say, you know, work on that first. Get some heads, get something that's going to flow air before you get into that, to the tunnel ram or anything, bigger carburetors, you know, stuff like that. Everything, you probably hear this a lot, but everything in your engine needs to work together. You don't need to be flowing way more air up top than down below is ready for. It's just not going to work for you. Okay, what's our next topic here? So let's get into what kind of carburetor should you run. To be honest with you, I'm going to tell you what I started off with and what I run now. I, of course, didn't go through every type of carburetor that there is available. But what I did do, and what a lot of people do, is I went online and I read. I read about people's experiences, what people have done, what they've seen, and you got to kind of make a judgment, you know? I mean, the last thing you want to do is go on the internet and get one guide, where you just go on, you read what one guy said, and then you're out there doing what this guy said. Don't do that. Read what 100 people said, and even then, they might still be wrong. And that happened to me. Like, I read a lot, and there's a ton of misinformation out there. Maybe it's not misinformation in the specific scenario that they were dealing with, but it was completely opposite of what I had going on, is what I'm saying. So, the kind of carburetor that I started off with was actually these. And this is a common carburetor for tunnel ram specific setups, and it's a Holley 660 center squirter. Now these have been converted to run a metering plate on both sides, and they don't have the transfer tubes for the fuel anymore, so they kind of resemble a double pumper, but they're not. They're still 660 center squirters. So this is what I started off with. This is what people told me, and I had these already, so it was like, yeah, I'm gonna run these. And people told me, yeah, 660s, those are designed for tunnel rams, they're great for that. Well, maybe. After putting them on, trying to tune them, and trying to get them to run right on the street, I realized that I'm gonna go ahead and say that they're not ideal for the street in general, not just for the way that I specifically drive. So what I'm saying here is this carburetor is, in my opinion, and maybe they're advertised that way, I don't even know, but they're a drag racing carburetor. And why I think that is that this carburetor, okay, so why I say these carburetors are a drag racing carburetor is that the linkage on these carburetors, and I don't mean the linkage that you install to connect to your throttle cable. I'm talking about the actual linkage on the carburetor itself. That's part of the carburetor. Is a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning that your primaries and your secondaries open at exactly the same time. And turn this over. You look at this. What you'll see is that as this is opened, the primaries barely open and your secondaries are already going. Okay? I know it looks like they're opening first, but trust me, when we go over to a double pumper, it doesn't look like that. Another thing that contributes to a drivability issue that I was having is that the accelerator pumps, they're center squirters, so you got 2 on one side and 2 on the other side, both in the middle. The accelerator pumps fire when you initially hit the throttle, and that's it. You get that one shot and it's over. As the secondaries open, completely open, there's no more accelerator pump. Once you use it, it's done. And the issue that I was having was, and maybe this is just the way I was driving, who knows? Maybe it differs from, you know, person to car. But I would take off from a stop sign. I would use however much of that accelerator pump shot, right? Then I'm cruising, and then you stomp on it, right? Boom, everything opens wide open. But you don't have any accelerator pump shot left. It was over. Whether you get half, whether you get a quarter, whatever. It was never enough. Change to a bigger squirter, change to the biggest size pump you could get. I just could not get that dead spot out of there. So that, while not ideal for the street, is fine for drag racing, because you're hitting it off the line once and you're all in. On the street, it just didn't work for me. I personally could not tune that out of there. And it just, having everything open up so wide, it never ran right. I just could never get the mixture right. What I then switched to was two 650 double pumpers. Now these, the linkage on these, you can see down in there. Primary opens first and you get that pump shot, and then the secondaries open up and you get the back shot. That worked much better for me. I would take off from a stop sign, no bogs, no hesitations, no nothing. And then I would get into it, I'd hammer on it, and that second pump shot was what it needed to not have that dead spot. Admittedly, I had to up the squirters and the accelerator pumps to the biggest size I could get to fully get rid of that dead spot, but it fixed it for me. And it's run so much better since I made that switch that I will not be going back. I mean, if I change it to a race car, maybe go back to the 660s and they would work better, because they're more of a race carburetor. These ones have the choke horns milled off. They probably flow more air, but in a street application, it really just didn't work for me. To wrap up, what kind of carburetor? Like, you're gonna have people tell you, oh, a vacuum secondary, you know, a this, a that. I never tried that. I'm just telling you what worked for me. The 660 center squirter, I could not tune the bogs and dead spots out of it no matter what I did. And I contribute that to the design of the carburetor more than me not knowing what the hell I'm doing, which, believe me, is also a factor in all of this. The next thing we'll talk about is what size of carburetor should you run. It is of my opinion that if you have an engine that runs really well and you're on a single 4-barrel, if you switch to a tunnel ram, you can run 2 of whatever you've got. If it runs good. If you, like anything else, if the carburetor is already way too big for your engine, you're a guy that thinks, man, the bigger the better. Let me get the biggest cam in there I can. Let me put the biggest carburetor on I can. You might run into issues. But if you have a good running small block and it's got, say, a 750 on it, you switch to a tunnel ram, you can run 2 750s. And we'll talk about the tuning on those. If you go on the internet, say that's your exact scenario. You had a small block, it ran with a 750, you put a tunnel ram on, you now have 2 750s, the exact same carburetor. What you want to do is, if you're rebuilding them or if you're going to reset them, whatever, get them back to the exact stock configurations. Start there. Start with the stock sizing of the jets, stock everything. Start with a stock baseline on your carburetors, and you're going to go from there. If you go on the internet and you look up what people think carburetor sizes you should run, they're all going to tell you that you run the smallest ones you can find. Run two 390s, two 450s, and you're going to jet them down as small as you can. Don't do that. Trust me, that's where I started with all this, and it was so far off, it was ridiculous. If your engine's going to run good with one of them, you'll run good with two of them. All you're doing is you're splitting that volume of air between the two. You're not going to have this crazy rich fuel mixture. That carburetor, as it is designed to run a certain fuel mixture at a certain RPM, which all the RPM is the amount of air going through it, right? So say you've got one carburetor and you're running all the air through it at 6,500 RPM, okay? You've got a lot of airspeed going through there, and that's what's pulling your fuel in, the vacuum from your engine. Well, when you switch to two, you're just decreasing the amount of air that's running through this carburetor and the amount of airspeed. Instead of sucking through one straw, you're sucking through two. So what this carburetor was, on when it was by itself, was providing all the fuel at 6,500 RPM. Well, now that volume of air is decreased. So now this thing is pulling, I don't know what it is, if it's half, whatever it is. The volume of air and the airspeed going through there is decreased, but you're still having the same amount of fuel being delivered for the amount of air that's going through there. So it's not like you need to adjust your mixture a ton. Your carburetor knows how much air is going through it, and it's going to provide that amount of fuel. So while your tuning may be different, it's not going to be humongously different. Don't jet it way down. That's what I did. When I started, I jetted these carbs way down because that's what everybody said. It's going to be too much carbs, it's going to be too much fuel. No. I jetted it way down and I was lean as hell. I actually had to come up 4 jet sizes on both sides past stock to get out of a lean condition with both of these carburetors. I'm not saying that's what's going to work for you. I'm saying that don't go by what people think. Put them at stock, go for a ride, put it through all the different conditions, cruising, wide open throttle, check your wideband, and make your adjustments from there. Do not go by what people say where it's going to be lean. You got to jet it way down. You have so much carburetor on there. No. This carburetor is designed by itself to run from what, 900 RPM to whatever your engine can do. Just because you have 2 of them on there just means you're going to have less air and less airspeed going through there. Where that does affect you is like things like throttle response, okay? Because like I said, now you're sucking through 2 straws instead of 1. So you don't have as much air going through these as fast. So the amount of time it's going to take for that air and that fuel to get down there with 2 carburetors versus 1 is a little bit slower. That's where a big carburetor is going to get you. You have so much air and fuel coming through that your little air pump can't suck it all in, especially with any airspeed. So start stock, tune from there. And I would say 8 times out of 10, if you've got a dead spot off idle, you need more fuel. You're gonna need to up your squirter size and up your pump size. In my case, I could see it on the wideband immediately. I would get into it and it would go whatever was max lean. I think it was 22, and every single time until I up that accelerator pump and squirter size, then that dead spot would go away. And Also, guys, like, I'm not just making shit up here. Like, this thing runs good now. If you don't believe me, go watch my videos. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I'm not saying it's, you know, the greatest, most powerful engine in the world, but it runs good with this induction setup on it. You can watch for yourself. Okay, so for tuning, if you know how to tune a carburetor, once you get them both on there, the starting process that you're going to want to do is that's different than when you have a single. In regards to tuning, is you're going to want to sync them. Syncing a carburetor just means that they're both at idle, bringing in the same amount of air. The throttle blades are in the exact, well, the throttle blades may not be in the exact same position, but they're bringing in the same amount of air at the same time. And the way this is done is with one of these carb syncing tools. You put a carb hat on there. I don't know what I did with mine, or else I would show you. Well, let me take a step back. Once it's running, you got it there idling, you're gonna take your linkages off. Take them completely off. Let the vehicle sit there and run. You put a carb hat on, you put your little vacuum meter up here, and you see what one carb is pulling. You can adjust this. There's an adjustment on this so that while it's running, you can get this ball at a certain point. Depending on how much air is being pulled through there. Imagine a bowl on here with a hole in the top. This goes on there, it's sucking all the air through here, and that registers on this little ball. Okay? I'm doing a horrible job of holding the camera here. Carb hat right here, hole in the top, this goes on the top, air is passing through there, and it shows up on here. You adjust your throttle blades to where this ball is at a certain point right here. Then you go to this one and you do the exact same thing. Adjust your throttle blades to where the amount of air being pulled through here puts this ball as the exact same as this one. Once you can move this thing from side to side and that ball is showing up on the same spot on both, you know that both of those carburetors are pulling the exact same amount of air in at their adjustments. At that point, put your linkages back on, and you know that those things, like when you put them on, you adjust your linkage to where that ended up, where you adjusted your throttle blades. You're going to adjust this linkage so that it fits right on there, and then you know these things are pulling in the same amount of air at idle, and they're moving at the exact same when you move the throttle. To wrap up, make sure that you really want to run a tunnel ram and that you're willing to put in the work to do it, and that your engine has the ability to run good with it. Don't pick a big old monster tunnel ram, you know, a big old rectangular port job that is just, it's too much of a volume of air, you're losing air velocity. Down low, it's just not going to work right. You have to make power to get up into the power, if that makes any sense. The next thing is your carburetor choice. What kind of carburetor are you going to run? Again, like I said, I didn't try them all. What worked good for me and I was able to make work really good is the double pumper style. I do not recommend a 660 for the street unless you're a genius and you know how to make that shit work right, or you're street racing, like your drag race, you're full on off the line, and that's it. Tuning it, when you go to tune, set your carburetors back to their stock configuration and work from there. Use your wideband, read your plugs, and make your adjustments from there. And also, I forgot to talk about power valves, but that goes along with knowing how to adjust a carburetor. Take your vacuum measurement, see what you got, and adjust your power valves from there. It's depending on your cam, it's the amount of vacuum you're going to make is going to lead you to what size power valve you're going to run. I think I have 3.5s in these. I've got barely any vacuum. syncing. Make sure you get them synced. You want them both doing the same thing. That's another one of the most important things. Get them opening and closing and pulling the same amount of air in at all times. When you go to do your idle screws, you're going to do that the same as you would if you were doing one carburetor. You know, you're going to adjust it. You're going to listen for your RPM changes. You're going to be looking at your wideband, making sure it's, you know, at the air fuel ratio that you want. And I would say the most important thing about running a tunnelorama on the street, and me personally, this is just what I think. If you want to do it, then do it. If you're willing to make it work, make it work. I can't tell you how many threads on the internet I read where a guy is asking if he should run a tunnelorama on the street, and people are trying to talk him out of it left and right, saying it's not worth the headache, it's going to run better with one. I did it on my car, it was so many headaches and I had so much problems with it, I just took it off and put it on the shelf and never even tried again. If you're going to have that attitude, don't even bother. If you want to make it work, if you want to make anything work, make it work. Do what you got to do to make it work. You can make it work. Even if my only option was these 660s, they'd be on this car right now and I'd be figuring out how to make it work. And I wouldn't stop till I got there. So, you want to do it, do it. Don't give up. Put in the work. Read. Learn as much as you can. And do whatever the hell you have to do to make it work. And that goes for any part on your car. You want to make it work? You want to use it? Use it. Don't listen to people telling you, no, that'll never work. You can't do that. It's not designed for that. Well, maybe it's not. But I'm going to make it happen. Bottom line. So I think that about covers it for my tips. Like I said, guys, I'm not an expert. I'm just telling you what worked for me. And this thing, while it doesn't make enough power for my taste, it's not because of the tunnel ram or that setup. It's just because it's a naturally aspirated 355 that it's only capable of so much. So that about wraps it up. You want to tell me I'm a moron and I don't know what I'm talking about, or if this kind of helps you, gives you a little confidence into doing it, by all means let me know, guys. Right on. See you later.